All right, we don't have our nameplates up here tonight. Certainly introduce ourselves if there's anyone here that doesn't know who we are. Why don't we just do that? Leslie, do you want to start?
Hello, everyone. I'm Leslie Perkins.
I'm Holly Davis.
I'm Paul Lafayette, the solicitor.
Mary Atkins?
Renee Van Winkle.
Bob Walter.
Nick Kennedy.
Thank you. All right, and I'm going to mix up the agenda here a little bit. So, Council, you received the minutes from May 11. Any comments or changes?
Motion to approve the minutes, Mayor.
Ms. Davis.
Yes.
Mr. Kennedy.
Yes.
Mr. Moore. Ms. Perkins.
Yes.
Mr. Walter.
Yes.
We can do the call. It's all right. We just don't think it. Okay, and Mr. Moore is still not feeling well, so he's not here this evening. All right, you also received current expenses. Any questions?
What is the control and instrumentation? It's on 512.
For the, some electronics for the sewer plant.
And utility truck equipment, is it a new truck?
For the new bucket truck.
Did we just get that, or we just got the bill?
We just received it.
We just got the bucket truck.
These were the approved expenses in the budget.
Yes, but I was under the impression we got that back in December, because I asked how we hung the Christmas decorations.
We used our old bucket truck for that, and then we rent a 80-foot lift also.
Any other questions?
Make a motion to approve the expenses as submitted.
Second.
Ms. Davis.
Yes.
Mr. Kennedy.
Yes.
Mr. Perkins.
Yes.
Mr. Walter.
Yes.
All right, moving into reports. Council, the only thing I wanted to share is that I did make a decision that I'm staying internal for the selection of police chief, and I will bring a recommendation at the next meeting. Renee?
Mayor, I have nothing.
And Mr. Jaskowitz. Oh, I'm sorry, Sergeant Jaskowitz.
Just real briefly, we obviously had our Memorial Day Parade and the Heritage Days Horse Parade. Both of those went without many issues. We participated, several officers participated in the Union County Law Enforcement Memorial. We've conducted our annual firearms requalifications over the last several weeks. Sergeant McKee met with Union County Deputy Chief Tom Morgan to get our supply of the Narcan that we're going to be using for those types of events, overdoses and so forth, for participating with Union County and Marysville Police Department. With that, a couple of different trainings that our officers have been to. Officer Drudy has attended the VAC Data Master training. Sergeant McKee attended an empowerment and productivity seminar at OPATA. And he's also, as a department, we've participated in the Click It or Ticket mobilization that ran through the 18th of May through the end of the month. And he continues to get accolades and recognition through NHTSA and some of the regional partners with NHTSA for his efforts with Mr. Click It or Ticket.
Yes, I got a couple of those emails. It was a nice recognition. Thank you. Anything else?
That is all.
Any questions? Thank you. All right. Village Minister.
Pretty brief, seeing as how we have a full agenda. I just want to let y'all know that we have received the state contract pricing for road salt. We've secured 400 tons of salt for the 2015-2016 season at a cost of $75.29 per ton. If you recall, we paid about $114 last year, so this is a savings of $66.51 per ton. or a total savings for the 400 tons of $26,604. This was in part caused by two factors. The salt market softened a little bit, which helped in pricing. And the biggest factor was the construction of our new salt barn. With building the new barn, we're able to take delivery of larger stockpiles and allows us to participate in the state salt contract, which we were not able to do before because we couldn't take a large enough delivery. You have to take the full amount at the beginning of the season. We weren't able to store 400 tons. So we were on the summer fill contract, which is typically a cheaper cost than the winter fill contract, just due to supply and demand. So essentially, we will see a return on our investment for the new salt barn within approximately 2 years. And unless there's any questions, that's all.
I have a question. Does the village anticipate receiving any proceeds from the price fixing agreement with the Attorney General?
I have not received any communication from them at this time.
Okay, because as I read the article, both salt companies have admitted to price fixing, and there's supposed to be a sizable settlement.
Okay. Okay, President Pro Tem.
Nothing really, Mayor, but I did want to make a comment. We had, I think it was at the last meeting or the meeting before, you had mentioned something about Facebook posts. At the time, I didn't know what you were talking about. I have since learned, and I wanted to make a comment about that because I think they reflect on all of us. My opinion on this is, Leslie, those comments that you made, you simply just light a match and you walk away with the public. You do not give them 100% of the information. You don't come back when information is stirring in Facebook posts, you don't come back to correct any of it. I think it makes all of us look bad. And I've got 4 points that I want to make. One, you didn't discuss the issue of constitutionality with that group. They went off and got upset that we're unpatriotic, whether we haven't lived here long enough to understand how to run this particular government. You didn't talk to them about the constitutionality that both Paula and I both discussed with you, as if the Constitution is a minor thing. Two, your issue was, we spent $3,000 on the fence. But what you didn't mention to the group as they were getting crazy about it was the fact that that money came out of the Green Space Fund and can only be used for park improvements. You also mentioned something along with Nick Kennedy brought it to council, as if I'm the bad guy, but you failed to mention that you voted for it. And four, and most important, this is what really upset me about the whole thing, you not correcting that entire Facebook thread, is that after the meeting, you, Colleen, and Paul stood out afterwards, and I said something along the lines of, why don't we talk about seeing if the village can take back over the fireworks, having a committee where you chaired it, and then you would raise the money. And in the event that the committee still raised the money, we would put on the fireworks. And that would do one of two things. That would do one of two things. One, we wouldn't have to charge our own committee for the fairgrounds. And two, as Paul said, our insurance already covers the fireworks. And he asked Colleen, how much would that cost? How much do you spend on insurance? Which I think you said about $800, $900. That's a $1,500 savings. So all of that going on Facebook, not once do you step in after you light that match to get everyone going, get the rapidness, everyone's upset. Do you step in and say any of those things to diffuse the situation? And so I think you're using that as a sounding board. I understand you think you're wearing a cape and doing the right thing for everybody here, the champion of the people. But all you're doing is stirring the crap up and giving misinformation and half-truths. And I don't think it's appropriate. And I'll give you one more example. You said when Mr. Kaiser resigned, your response was, and I'll be the first to say, I didn't see eye to eye with Sean on most of the things, but we still need to act professional. Your response was a woohoo, a great day for Plain City. This is a man who had to resign because he was going through personal family issues. And your comment was totally unprofessional, especially one who has mayoral aspirations such as yourself. And I think if I leave, what do you say behind my back to all these people? If that's what you say about Sean, just because we had personal or business disagreements here when he's going through such personal things. And that was unprofessional and uncalled for. And I don't think that's appropriate. And I don't care under what form you think that's appropriate, but I don't want to see it anymore. That's all I have.
Well, this has caught me out of left field. Had I known this before, I would have been happy to have something prepared. But, you know, on Facebook, I do state my opinion, how I feel, and it is how I feel. And then when someone else comes back and has their opinion, It's no different than us standing out on the sidewalk having a conversation.
My only point really goes to, if you're the creator of that thread, you are almost a steward. You act, in my opinion, as a steward. And if these folks,
I only state,
it's your job to make sure misinformation's not stirring, just to get everyone upset and to get passions riled up. If those things are going on, you need to indicate the facts. And you just left a whole bunch of stuff out in that particular thread. And I'm not generally on.
specific.
I just gave you 4 points.
Do you have it printed? Let me see it.
No,
Well,
I gave you 4
then,
points.
I cannot comment because I don't know what
Don't
you're
comment on the
speaking of.
Facebook thread on which you were on.
Well, that's fine, but when you're coming at me on something specific, I need to know what that specific thing is,
I gave you 4 points, Leslie, very specific.
not what it was said on Facebook. Who
I
said
told you the
what and
things-
what exactly was said? You're generalizing,
No, those
so
aren't
I cannot give you a
generalizations.
general response.
All right, well,
Please be specific, or show me a printout,
I-
what you're speaking of,
I'm
and I
very
will
specific.
respond.
I was very specific. The entire thread that you would occasionally jump in on and keep going, you never at any time indicated those facts to the people that you were stirring up. And I'm telling you, I think you're responsible.
Be specific.
I'm not
I
done
don't know what you're
talking.
talking about.
Okay.
All right, now you're
All right.
talking over me, and that's fine. I was very specific to you. The things you didn't mention to them, I gave you those 4 specifics. You didn't, and I see you had a responsibility to make sure, if you're gonna get everyone passionate about a topic, and all stirred up and all fired up, to get them essentially mad at all of us, then be accurate. And don't go on half-truths and part-truths. Because that's all you did there.
You need to be specific. I don't know
Okay.
what
We're
you're
not
talking
making
about.
progress
I don't
here.
think you understand the word specific, if that's, I gave you specifics.
Can anyone here
Okay,
comment to
no,
what he's?
no, they can't. And I will simply say that, as it is with Facebook and any social media, we as leaders in this community have a responsibility to act professional, to guard our tongues, to developers and everybody out there are looking at us. Do they like Plain City? Can they come here and do business? Are we people they want to work with and deal with? So we have to be leaders and we have to be careful. And that's why we will be bringing forward a social media document that we will agree to going forward. We can work on it. Paul's drafting it. We can certainly, as a group, work on it. But we have to have some boundaries. We have to. All right. Pro Tem, did you have anything else?
I know, I'm sorry, Mayor, and thanks for indulging me. We had spoken last time when Sean was aboard of having a work session. It's nothing that we formalized. Honestly, he didn't pass on too many notes. I don't have notes from the times that we were talking about, so I don't know if that's something we want to look at going forward. If I remember correctly, I think there was discussion on perhaps doing it after, I think the next budget was looked at.
Well, after we get recommendations.
Oh, that's
And we
right.
talked about the TIF, but Wayne Valentine has not come back to us yet about his project. So
Okay, so we'll just talk about that in 2 weeks then.
once we have recommendation from Rock Mill, then we can make decisions.
okay.
about that. All right. Paul, did you have anything?
As far as what I've been working on, obviously council has all received, I think, 2 different memorandums that you had requested guidance on with regard to constitutional type issues. One dealing with the park rental to different entities, and also the other one was dealing with the solicitation issue, I guess for lack of a better term, these circulars that could be, that were being dropped off, the little newspaper circulars that were ending up in people's driveways or in their yards and cluttering. And you've received those, my memorandum regarding my constitutional analysis of those, and also some, generalized recommendations. I mean, ultimately, it's your decision on the policy, but I gave you kind of the framework of where to go on those issues, and I assume probably maybe the next meeting, that'll be something we'll put on the agenda to discuss. I know tonight's meeting is busy. The other issue is we have the pending litigation. That's what I've been working on with the Lees. That is still progressing, and we're still in discovery on that one. We have a summary judgment deadline that has been extended to August now. And my prior views on that remain the same. Nothing's changed there. And I'm continuing to work on the property maintenance code, and I have a meeting with Ms. Toller tomorrow to go over some additional issues with regard to that. And other than that, just standard review of documents and contracts, and I think some public records requests. That's pretty much all I have to report.
We have been working on the property maintenance code. Are we still having a hearing on the 17th? Yeah. Okay, so the public hearing will be June 17th.
Okay. BCA.
I was unable to meet at the last meeting, Mayor, due to a scheduling conflict, but they did still meet, and I understand there was one issue before them, which was, and I apologize for the property, you remember the property number or the street? They knocked down the house over there by the senior center. They asked for approval to knock that down and build a duplex, which was approved.
KM West.
Maple and West.
Maple
Maple,
West, yeah.
thank you.
Okay, Kevin, anything on CIC? Park?
Parks, we had a meeting last week. We kind of put our master plan on hold to discuss the ongoing issues as it relates to park rentals, park fees, camping issues. Needless to say, it was a large meeting. It had, I think it's safe to say we weren't finished in the 2 hours or so that we met. What we do plan to meet again, I think it was the 28th or 23rd, something like that, sometime later this month, to finish that discussion. And once we finalize that, I'll have more information for you.
Did you discuss park fees for
Yeah.
rentals?
We did.
And may I ask what was discussed?
Once we're done with that conversation, I will have something more for you. I mean, we were all throwing out ideas. No one, we didn't come to any conclusions, but we discussed park fees, we discussed camping fees, we discussed how to handle it going forward, being uniform. So once, hopefully we'll have that, it won't be for the next meeting probably, but 2 meetings from now, we'll have that taken care of.
Someone doing minutes, we do need that to part. I think that Sean was doing that and.
Amber does that?
Amber, did you take minutes?
Yes, I have it.
Yes. Someone's taking minutes.
So those, yeah.
Any other questions, Liz?
So the July 4th, we will still be charged $650 for the use of the park.
That's not up to me as a member of the park committee. That's up to, I mean, that's not a question for me.
Okay.
And that is something is in place currently, so we can't, it hasn't been changed, so until
Okay.
it comes forward to council.
Honestly, I don't anticipate any changes being made in this particular calendar year. And this isn't something I've really discussed with the rest of the members. We haven't gotten to the timing of it. Well, maybe we did tangentially touch on that. But it would make sense, given the fact we've already had some in this particular year under a certain scheme to change it starting in 2016. Although I may be wrong, we may end up doing otherwise, but I think that would probably be my recommendation with the committee. But we'll see. Any other questions, Leslie?
No.
So just to be clear, that fee is something that's been in place for several years, and it would have to be, this council would have to be who changes that. So, all right. I think there's anything new, personal finance. And fire, Jim is not here.
I got it. Chief, when's the trustee meeting?
It will be Thursday evening.
Pardon?
Thursday evening at 5:30.
Okay. The reason I asked, if Jim is still ill, I'm the designated alternate, so I will plan to attend if he's still hospitalized.
Do you receive your Plain City email?
Yeah.
I'll have the administrative assistant send you a copy of last month's
Great,
stuff so that you can review it prior to coming to the meeting.
okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. Old Business Council, second reading of Resolution 1215, Green Space Fund Amendment.
Motion to approve, second reading, 1215.
Second.
Ms. Davis. Mr. Kennedy.
Yes.
Ms. Perkins.
Yes.
Mr. Walter.
Yes.
We also have the second reading of 1315, Recreation Fund Amendment.
Motion to approve, second reading, 1315.
Second.
Ms. Davis?
Yes.
Mr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Ms. Perkins?
Yes.
Mr. Walter?
Yes.
All right. Council, we need to fill a vacant position this evening. And we have, well, I'll read the list. We had 8 interested individuals. John Rucker, Chris Stock, Frank Smith, Don Wampler, Carrie Ferguson, Mandy Wilcox Cheeseman, Robert Kavanaugh, and Darren Lee. And we have 3 people, maybe just one that wanted to speak. Mr. Smith? Did you want to speak, or did you?
Well, you said I should be here. and-
Yeah, just introduce, that's good. I don't know that everyone knows.
I'm Frank Smith.
This is Frank Smith. Are there any of the other candidates that want to introduce themselves quickly?
I've lived in, I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
I've lived in the town for almost 40 years. I was on council once in the early 80s. I've held acting judgeships in both counties and municipal court. I've taught civics, so forth. I have an interest, and I have time, and I made a little resume, which I hope everybody got in their emails. And I'm just here to answer any questions that you might have. If not, I'll make a quick statement and I'll be done. If it's good for Plain City, I'm for it, okay? So that basically puts me right down the middle of the road. Any questions?
All right. Carrie?
I'm Carrie Ferguson, and as a local business owner and a resident of Plain City, I feel that I could bring multiple perspectives to council. As I stated in my letter, I volunteered for UPCO for several years, and I've been on the board of directors for the Madison County Chamber of Commerce. With that being said, I'm pretty sure that I'm aware of some of the issues that is facing Plain City, and I am just committed to work with other council members to act in the best interest of the village. So thank you for your consideration.
Thank you.
My name is Robert Kavanaugh, and I've been a resident of Plain City for 17 years. Live on Main Street. I'm the Vice President of Regulatory Affairs for a pharmaceutical company here in Columbus. I lead a department of 55 people with a $2.5 million budget, and I'm on the lead team of our site here, where we have revenues of $250 million per year with a 35% annual growth rate. I'm here to say that I think I can help the village from a business perspective, and I really enjoy living here, and I'd be proud to serve the village.
Okay. Who else did I see? Don Wampler? Oh, not here. Okay. Mandy Wilcox?
Hi, I'm Mandy.
Say who you are. There you go.
Wilcox Cheeseman. I've been here my whole life. My birthday's July 4th, 30 years.
And I don't believe Chris Stock is here. He could not be here this evening. And Darren Lee, I don't see Darren Lee here either. Darren serves on planning and zoning. Right, council. Need nominations?
I nominate Ms. Ferguson.
I second that.
And to that extent, it kind of feels awkward for me in the sense that it's not a popularity contest. I apologize to anyone out there who's interested in the position. I do thank you for applying for it, and I wish I knew all of you as well as I know some of you.
No. Okay. So, go ahead.
Ms. Davis?
Yes.
Mr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Ms. Perkins?
Yes.
Mr. Walter?
Yes.
Ms. Ferguson, thank you and
Thank you.
welcome aboard.
Can I make a statement? I've heard some gentlemen speak with very good credentials this evening, and there's going to be 2 openings on council this coming fall. And council's going to be in need of some leadership, so I would urge you, to consider filing and running for election. The village needs a lot of attention, a lot of changes coming, and we just need good, strong, professional leadership.
Thank you. Okay.
Take care. Thanks, Tom.
Carrie, staff have been working to put a packet of information together for you, so Kevin will have that.
Camera.
So let's see for us. So, and then, we didn't bring it up. Renee was in training all day, so we didn't bring an oath with us or signs. We got some few signals. So maybe she just doesn't join us until next.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything.
We have a judge, right?
That was acting, that's just.
Oh, okay, all right.
Let me put it another way, brother, you missed a chance.
Understood.
She hasn't brought the donuts yet either.
So Carrie, we will do that at the next meeting, swear you in, and we're not making any decisions going forward tonight. So, all right. Did have Ernie wanted to talk about the 4 Mile Run?
Well, yeah, but park rentals would be my discussion point too, if I may. Okay. Yeah, my name's Ernie Shepard. I are representing the Plain City 4 Miler. This is going to be our 9th year, and I am a Mason, the treasurer. Okay, don't hold that against me, of Urania 311 and the UPCO. There's some UPCO individuals here too that for the last, now I'm working on 9 years, that we've put together a 4 mile run walk. Some of you have participated, some Mayor Wise has been there to start the race off, that type of thing. But one of the things that I would like to basically talk about alone, I know I have a short period of time, is that, you know, we bring this together for our 2 organizations, but we also, for the town, okay? We call it the Plain City 4 Miler. And over the years, the 8 years or so, a lot of things change. I noticed a lot of change in the town type of thing where, you know, you had people that you had to lay off, okay? They put out the cones. Well, you know, the last couple of years, we've paid somewhat for it, but a great support of the town and the council for that. So that's one of the things that I would like for you to consider. And then also, if we can speak at your committee, if we can, to talk about the consideration that we have. Again, here, if you've been participating the last couple of years or so, we gave out horseshoes, okay? Stamped horseshoes, that type of thing, as memorable. Well, the last couple of years, because of the cost, it's been going up. So we've changed that type of thing. But again, if we had 200, 250, and we had major sponsors, okay, that were doing it, it wouldn't be a question. But right now, for what we scrimp and save and knock on doors, and I'd like to talk to you from your company, but you know, from the standpoint, we really would like for you guys to consider not charging us to use the park. We start our race at the park, right? We end it at the park. We run through town, that type of thing. Your police department has been very supportive. Obviously, safety is very important. We have a run walk. We also, in the last couple of years or so, we've added a kids run, okay, by one of the teachers in town. So we're trying to bring more people, you know, into this town, but also for the 2 organizations that, you know, $1,000, $1,500, $2,000 that maybe we split, that type of thing is very important. I can speak from a treasurer from the Urania Lodge. This is our largest fundraiser, okay, where we get. Now, we're going to hopefully help on some of the car shows and sell some food and some of those things. But honestly speaking, it is very important for us as a lodge, right, to do this and try to make some profit on this. So again, if anybody has any questions or if anybody else wants to add anything, We would like truly to you guys consider not charging our event. That's the bottom line, please. And we love to see you out there running, walking with your families and grandkids and whatever else, because it's a good time. And I think the mayor can, you know, maybe say a few words too.
It is a fun time, and we have lots of people. How many signed up last year?
Well, again, our first year was about 50 or so, okay? And I'd say that we have maybe 160, 165, you know, from that standpoint. It's not a large race, but it's a fun one. We start early in the morning on Saturday. The Columbus Running Company in Dublin, they support us, you know, from that standpoint. And again, their help is also costing us something too. I know we want to get in dollars and cents, but truly it is. So again, would you like to have the consideration, you know, for our event? And if you have any questions, I can leave my name, my number. Shannon, which probably everybody knows here, or most knows, right, from the UPCO group. Also Julie. We've been more than happy to answer any questions on that. And anything that we can go and talk about and give more information to for your committee and everything, we'd be more than happy to do that. So again, thank you for your time. Is there any questions? No? Okay, thank you.
Nick, when's the next park committee?
23rd, is that what it is?
Yeah.
Amber?
Yes.
Yeah,
So the next
23rd.
park committee meeting is the 23rd
Location? The youth building? Youth building?
at 6:30.
What time? Or 6:30? 6:30? That's okay.
I thought the park committee didn't decide on fees. I thought it was a council issue.
That's correct. But they are talking about recommendations they want to bring forward.
Okay. I thought he was asking about what they were going to be charged.
Well, there's a set fee for use of the park,
Which is,
it depends on which space you use, and I don't have that in front of me.
well, they
right
use
now.
the whole park. They use the youth building, they use the Lions building, they go through the whole park.
I don't have that information here.
Sir, do you know what you'll be charged for the use of the park that day?
Okay. While they're putting together recommendations, it would be good for you to go to them, to park first and talk to them.
We'll have representation.
Great, thank you.
This is kind of what the Parks Committee is trying to determine, and from an administration side of who do we charge, how do we charge, what triggers a charge? Is it a group of 100 people having a family reunion? Does that trigger? We need some direction as administration on how to enforce this policy because it's very unclear to us as to how to do that. So we're working with the Parks Committee to try to clean that up so that we know how to enforce those policies that you've created. So we are working with the committee to figure all of that out, and they've not ironed all of those issues out yet, so hopefully.
So in other words, the document that's in place has some vagueness to it that you can't seem to figure out.
When it comes to less than full park rental or portions of the park.
And defining full
and
park.
defining what those are.
And there's also, I don't know if the right term is historical irregularity, but folks before all of us have done different things for different groups, and that needs to be resolved as well. And that's going to probably upset many groups and many people, but the fact of the matter is uniformity needs to be there, and that's our struggle, because we're going to break some eggs to make those cakes.
And I think in the document that we have, I haven't looked at it for a while, but I think it defines what a village event is, but that's something that needs to be looked at as well.
Well, we're lucky we have a
Definition.
gal that actually works, City of Columbus Parks Department, so a great resource there. We're obviously not the first village or government to look at how to handle these things. So we've got a lot of information to pull from.
1 minute.
I just got a question, how are you handling the deed restrictions?
Well, we do deal with those. You mean at the park?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a separate issue. That we're not talking about selling or buying or,
It's
Frank,
not
what you're
buying or
asking
selling,
about, I
there's
think I
restrictions
know.
hang
on
on,
that property.
please, Leslie.
I don't want to take up the time, but there's restrictions on that property.
Yes, we're fully aware of that.
Well, I was just asking, how does that play into this?
Well, maybe they look at that to see
I'd
if it
start there
does.
if I were you.
The only deed restriction that I'm aware of that it has to be used for village purposes, or village community purposes. I've got a copy of the deed.
No, we just recently.
There's two parcels.
There's two deeds.
The Huron parcel that was donated, which is principal, about 26 acres. And I can't remember the other parcel. But
I strongly suggest you check the deed restrictions on the
Okay.
other parcel.
We'll make sure that happens. Thank you. All right, we are ready. Oh, Delaney, did you want to speak to council? You, short. This is Delaney Getke? Getche.
I'm Delaney Gekshi. I am an upcoming senior at Jonathan Alder, and I am here to speak about the proposal of an anti-discrimination law in the village, and I would like to ask Councilman Perkins to please read the letter written on behalf of Jonathan Alder Student Council.
Okay, I was contacted by Alec Copes. Is that his name?
Alex Capez.
Capaz, I'm
He is
sorry.
our president. He has now graduated, and he was unavailable to attend tonight, so I am here to represent the council as a whole.
Okay, he sent me an email and asked me to present this to council and get council's thoughts, and then he was going to have someone here to speak on his behalf. I don't know if you read it, it was in the Advocate this week. It says, "Dear Editor, after the passing of so-called religious freedom laws in Indiana and Arkansas, there was a justifiable criticism about the possibility of laws being used for discrimination, especially against gay marriage. The laws also brought to light the lack of inclusive anti-discrimination laws in many states and localities. We, the Student Council of Jonathan Alder High School, strongly believe that now is the time for the Village of Plain City and the rest of Madison County and beyond to take action in this area. Plain City does not have any inclusive anti-discrimination law requiring equal treatment regardless of sex, age, religion, national origin, ethnicity, sexual orientation, gender identity, race, and political affiliation. This is a common sense provision with no legitimate reason to oppose this. This is a time for Plain City to be proactive and not reactive. It is a time for Plain City to declare that it cares about equality and fairness. This time is now. This is not unprecedented, Bexley is having this exact conversation that this editorial means to start. Bexley is close to adopting an inclusive anti-discrimination law that has broad support among local business and citizens there. If Bexley can do this, why not Plain City? Ohio does not have such a law either, thus meaning that action must be taken locally to solve this problem. While the debate over the religious freedom laws is fervent and has two passionate sides, anti-discrimination laws should bring little debate. Some would question the necessity of such a law. Why now? The answer is why not yesterday? There is never a time when discrimination should be condoned or even the possibility of being condoned. The policy would foster an attitude of acceptance and inclusion. Society right now, especially in conservative rural areas, is negatively impacted by the lack of such provisions. Such a provision would combat the ignorance that too often prevails. Local leaders and businesses must ensure that action is taken here and across the county. The JA Student Council would strongly advise the Village Council to enact this law. Jonathan Alder High School Student Council, Plain City.
So again, I was not one of the primary authors of this. Alec Capez was, and he deeply regrets that he cannot be here tonight, but he wanted me to reinforce the points that this would be a law that could do nothing but help. It would not harm anything. It is not something that has a dire need yet, but it is something that we foresee will be very necessary in the future, and we think it would be better to prevent problems occurring by having this law in place before there are more issues. Thank you.
Thank you. Put that on the agenda for next time. All right. Right, we are ready for the presentation by, Pathways is here, right? And that, pardon? I'm sorry?
Did we cover everybody on the side?
Yes. Yes, Pathways Credit Union is here this evening to make a presentation.
Hello, Mayor Atkins, councilmen and women. I'm Michael Conley, and this is Shannon LaShawn. We represent Pathways Financial Credit Union. We were formerly Western Credit Union here in town, and before that, we have a long lineage of Branco Credit Union. We're happy to be here tonight. We think there's so many wonderful things going on in Plain City. So often it's easy to get bogged down with looking at negative, and we want to embrace the positive. And one of the most positive things we can find in Plain City is remembering our past and going into the future. And the biggest icon we can see of that is the Plain City Clock Tower. And we want to remember the Raincoat days and the Western days of Pathways Credit Union and what that's meant to Plain City, but we want to look forward to the future. And with that in mind, Shannon and I would like to donate to UPCO, which is the body holding the funds for the clock tower, $5,000. This isn't Pathways money. The members of Pathways Credit Union, since it's member owned, this is their money. This is your money, and we want to reinvest it back into Plain City. So it brings us great joy to be able to give this to Mayor Atkins.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm sad that you had presented that to the UPCO group. Will go a long ways. Thank you. All right, now we are ready for Rockmill. Recommendations this evening. We have a presentation to council. If you want to adjust your seating if you need to. By dim the light.
Thanks, sir. I can have that.
Thank you.
Well, good evening, everyone. Tonight is the very last presentation that Rockville will be making to council, and I want to thank everyone from the city or the village that have participated with us through this almost 7-month process. This has been a very, very educational process for us, I think, as well as it has been for the village. And I want to honestly commend you for inviting us in to do this. This is not easy. Some of the recommendations that we'll have for you today will not be easy to hear, but they're important to hear. Because I believe, and I think everyone in the room tonight can see that this is a community that is moving in a different direction, is trying to improve, and change and improvement is not always easy. Our responsibility coming in was to take a look at first just the overall financial performance of the village, the financial management of the village, and then provide for you where we are today some recommendations to improve on what you've already started. So that's what tonight is all about. I want to take my time as I go through this to sort of explain where our recommendations are coming from. What's important for you to know is that in the recommendations that we're going to make to you, we're not necessarily saying that you need to do everything at once. But we are saying that we believe as you move forward, that putting some order and priority to these goals and objectives will be important. So Scott, if you'll move forward for us. As sort of a recap, we had our first meeting where we talked about the attributes of the village and compared you to other communities around the state. We also took a look at your budget and some of the financial highlights. The second meeting, we kind of talked about what financial goals and philosophies in general are and what ideals are for most local governments, and discussed developing and understanding some fiscal priorities. Our third meeting was where we went through the village's spending in absolute detail to look at the practices that you've had, to look at whether or not the rate of spending of the village was out of line with what we've seen across the state. And then we provided some guidance there. And now today, we'll be providing you our recommendations. So let's start with some of our conclusions and recap that for you and for the audience, because this audience has grown. Every time I come, there's another row back there. For the record, as we've looked at everything that you've done over the last 6, 7 years, the rate of growth in your spending is not out of line. It is actually acceptable. So the village has not spent money willy-nilly, and we think that it's reasonable. You've had some significant capital needs. You will have those going forward. So all of those things seem to work pretty well. We looked specifically at the police budget and found that the growth in the budget is, again, modest, not extraordinary. Overall, for the employees of the village, we found that the salaries seem appropriate based on current market data. In fact, if anything, the salaries might be a tad below average. However, that is a choice of council to decide whether or not pay should be where it needs to be. We have found that your capital and infrastructure spending has been inconsistent, but that's not uncommon in a community where revenues have not necessarily been keeping pace with the expenditures, and you've had to make some budget cuts. You've had to make some decisions about how much money to spend for capital. But we do know that because of that, it creates a need in the future that will be challenging. We've heard when we started that your water rates and sewer rates were high from a community's perspective, and one thing that we know is that everything is relative. When people think about taxes, when people think about their user rates and fees, from their perspective, it has a feel to it. But when you actually compare the water rates of the community and the sewer rates of the community, they're below averages. So the cost for the residents to pay for the services that they receive are actually below what most people are paying. The infrastructure improvements, however, still need to be dealt with, and we'll talk about that in a second. Our last conclusion drawn from our analysis from the financial perspective is that, in fact, the village's financial performance is good. Considering the challenges that the village has dealt with over the last several years, and this is also consistent with the rating for the bonds that the village recently issued, we can't find any indication that the financial performance is anything other than that. So we're satisfied with what our findings are there. So let's move to page 4. Starting with the fact that the village financial operations are very well managed. We've mentioned on more than one occasion in previous meetings that even so, we can tell based on what we call deferred capital maintenance and ultimately the need to sort of continue to staff the village for its growth, your revenues will not be able to meet your future needs to spend money. They just won't. There's no way to do it. You will need to deal with increasing revenues one way or the other, sooner or later. So you can write that down. Your needs will be extensive and they'll require prioritization. We've talked about trying to decide when to spend money, where, and how. And then lastly, the organization and focus are critical to the future success of the village. And I want to kind of delve right into what that means. So as we go forward, in order for you to move from where you are now to a point where you can actually start implementing some plans to move forward, you need some tools. You need to be able to have reliable data. The very first thing that we recommend that the village council receive is what we call a needs assessment. So each one of your department heads should sit down and really think about what their staffing needs are, what their capital needs will be, and put together for you a very detailed analysis of what their costs will be for at least the next 5 years. That particular needs assessment, again, it should cover all of the departments, and that will provide you the ability to make some decisions. We know that there's a need to do a comprehensive plan, and we don't suggest that you don't do that. However, in the order of the items that need to be dealt with, we think that might come down the road a little bit later. Community survey. One aspect of being able to move forward is really getting good quality feedback from the residents of the village to figure out exactly which services you should be providing. And we've had some conversations about various things, and even tonight we hear what the Parks Department should do or what anyone should do. From a management perspective, it's very difficult to know just what to deal with if you haven't gotten quality feedback from your community. So we think you need to do that. We think you need to find a good survey company that can ask good questions to provide you some insight into what it is the community really needs. And then you would prioritize those communities' desires and decide whether or not some of the services that you provide need to be improved or expanded or maybe even eliminated. And there might be, in fact, some things that show up that you don't provide that you might consider providing in the future. But without good feedback, it's sort of difficult to do that. So we think those are two of the primary things that you need to have as a tool so you can move forward. Moving forward requires a couple of things. The first is that you have to have reliable data in order to make good decisions. The second thing is that you need to have the ability to work together, both as a council, as an administration, and as a community. Rockmill is a neutral party. We have no dog in this fight. We do want to see you succeed. We want to see you move forward, and I think your residents would like to see you move forward. One of the key issues in doing that is establishing a general approach to doing business together and a respect for one another. We think that government is much more effective when you have an established, productive, and positive atmosphere that's established through professionalism. We think that you can establish policies that will help you improve your governance. We also recommend and encourage the solicitor to take a more active role in that process, to see to it that council and others stick with particular policies and rules during the process of working together. We think that it's also beneficial that tools such as social media and other communications, whether it's from council or the administration, have rules regarding how they're used, so that as you begin to develop a plan to move forward, the community doesn't get mixed messages. That the community can see that you're moving in a direction that benefits them, and not one that gets bogged down in misinformation. We're not necessarily stating that there is misinformation, but the possibility of that can exist, and it can undermine your efforts to be successful. We think that when you do use social media and other communications, you should work to have a cohesive message. You want to make sure that there's no unnecessary confusion, and ultimately it improves the momentum and efficiency of you and your ability to serve the community. The last thing that we would recommend is that for council to access training that's available through the Ohio Municipal League regarding the various types of protocols and procedures that can help you operate together more efficiently. So let's move to page 7. Understanding that the ability to accomplish certain goals requires people to actually do that work. So as a council, obviously, you would establish goals and objectives, but those goals and objectives have to be reached through the efforts of others on your staff. We believe that you should focus a great deal on your personnel and allow them to do a good job for you. How do you do that? Well, you start by establishing and maintaining a proper chain of command. Through our work, we've noticed that various members of the administrative staff receive direction from multiple parties. And it makes it very difficult when you're trying to execute your job to have more than one boss. So I realize that the council is made up of a multitude of people with a multitude of ideas, but imagine having 6 or 7 bosses all telling you to do 6 or 7 different jobs. Very difficult. And I know the administration wants to do a good job, but it's difficult when you have so many voices saying do one thing or the other. So developing a practice where there's a single voice that speaks to the administrators to allow them to focus more specifically, I think will produce better results for the community overall. We also believe, and it isn't always the case across the state. However, we believe that it's important for those that work for the village to have, at least in executive capacities, to have a contract. A contract that establishes what their job description is in detail. So in other words, you want to have some type of a description that tells your administrators what it is you expect of them. How do you want them to execute their duties on a day-to-day basis? And that will help them become more effective, because without that, they're sort of just kind of swinging in the wind as to what their job is every day. On the other side of it, from a council's perspective, it helps you to measure their performance. So if you have a job description and you say to them, this is what I expect of you, it's easier for you to say at the end of the year, you did a good job, or you didn't do a good job. But without a job description, without duties that are assigned to these folks, it's very, very difficult to make good decisions about how you handle them. Or, let's just say, for example, someone isn't performing at a level that you'd like to see them perform. It's very difficult to actually make the case that they're not meeting your goals and objectives. We think that ultimately, having a job, contracts and job descriptions will allow you to determine their performance and ultimately whether or not their compensation is appropriate. And then the last point, institute a process of employee recognition. We know that in the last year or two, because staffing has been reduced substantially, that the staff requirements have been, the work requirements have been pretty extensive on the staff. That has an impact on employee morale, and we talked about in an earlier meeting, as morale declines, so does productivity. And if you're in a position where you can't pay money, recognition is a nice second option. So establishing a process where employees are recognized for the extra effort that they put in will ultimately produce higher productivity for the village and improve the financial performance overall. So that's our thought on the management and administration of the village. So let's zero in now on a few offices in particular and talk about some of the things that we believe are important. As you might expect, the time that we spent working on this meant that we had to work with your fiscal officer quite a bit in order to understand the financial operations of the village. We learned a few things as we went through that process, and I wanted to share those with you and talk to you about the importance of what we do here. One of the key things that I think you should know, obviously, is that the fiscal officer has a legal duty to the taxpayers of this community. The responsibility that she has every day are not minor, they're significant. And in that capacity, it's very difficult, again, for anyone to do the job without being given the proper atmosphere to execute those duties on a day-to-day basis. We think that the CFO requires respect from council, and quite frankly, if council is not satisfied with those duties, they should bring someone in that they can be satisfied with. But while they're in that capacity, the respect of council is important for that particular person to do the jobs that they do. We think that the budgetary process should be wholly controlled by the fiscal office. That's important because the fiscal officer is the one ultimately responsible for the financial performance of the village. If the fiscal officer is not actively engaged in the budgetary process, it diminishes their ability to weigh in on the financial performance of the village. So we think that a return of control of the budgetary process to the fiscal office is important. I will admit, when we were working through your financials, that we had some challenges matching up various reports because they were presented in various different formats. And that isn't uncommon. That's common for communities that are transitioning. We strongly recommend that you adopt and keep and use a single format. When you have multiple formats for presenting financial data, it's just inviting the opportunity for a mistake. And your budget is large enough where I really wouldn't recommend that going forward. We were pleased to know, as we went through this, because we looked at your audits going back a few years, that the village has received clean audits for a very, very long time. In fact, the audits are basically excellent that you've received for a very long time. We were also a bit surprised to know that council doesn't have an audit committee. And the audit committee is an important management tool of council when you interact with the fiscal office. It assures that council is aware. Now, just imagine if the audits weren't good. It leaves you out of the management loop for what's happening. We think that council should be involved at a minimum with an audit committee to know how well the job is being done, or in fact, if it isn't being done well. In this case, it's been done extraordinarily well, and we're not real sure that council fully understands how well it's been handled. But it is a protectionary measure in the event that if ever the audits didn't turn out very well, you would have a seat at the table so you understood what's happening. We have a concern, and you're going to hear this a couple of times, a concern about the fact that your fiscal officer is the only accountant, bookkeeper, finance person in the village. If, heaven forbid, as the old story goes, if Renee happens to get hit by a bus, you're up a creek, okay, without a paddle. It is not a good idea to have all of your eggs in one basket, using another colloquialism. We absolutely recommend that you create some type of backup for your fiscal officer. It is incredibly important that you do that. And we'll get into some details in a second. It doesn't have to be a new hire, but you have to have someone else that knows what's going on in that office. Your continuity of business is, without a doubt, very important and will continue to be more important as you go forward. Page 9. Administration. We went through a process of looking at staff. Keep in mind that the recommendations that we're making aren't being made so that people that are currently working for you can just have an extra 4 hours to enjoy their day. Some of the lessons that we've learned as we went through the analysis is that your financial performance is impacted by the fact that some of your administrators don't have the amount of time that they need to adequately do their job. And their primary jobs, I should say, which is costing you money. One example, again, is one of the trucks that tends to break down, forget if it's a salt truck or one of the vehicles that doesn't work consistently well. And it takes 2 people to do some things with it every 15 minutes when it breaks down. The fact that you have to assign 2 employees to fix a problem every so many hours is costing you money. The same is true when you have someone who could be dedicated to bringing in grant revenue or other possibilities under their assignment, has to do other jobs that don't produce revenue for the village. So in looking at the administration, our recommendations are to create flexibility so that people can focus on being more efficient and potentially raising revenues, which would be important. We would recommend that you look at hiring a one-time or a full-time zoning inspector. I think we understand that there's a part-time zoning inspector now. That zoning inspector, I believe, also reports to a committee that is not council and is not the administration. We would recommend that with the new hire, the new zoning inspector would report directly to either council or to someone in the administration, strictly from a control and management perspective. We think that a public works administrator would make sense, given the significant amount of public work issues that are ahead of you in the next few years. We think an administrative assistant is important, and we'll talk about potentially shared, because we believe there's some opportunities for you to use people between departments. So each department doesn't necessarily need its own administrative assistant, but you can potentially piggyback between departments on various folks. This is a key point. Appointed Director of Economic Development, and I've sat through several meetings where we've heard different discussions about economic development activity. Economic development activity will continue to grow here. There's no doubt. It may take 4 years or 5 years or 10 years. But at some point, the village needs to specifically say, this person is the economic development director. They're responsible for our representation to the world of developers that happen to have an interest in the village. It will allow you to have a singular representative. It will sort of minimize the multitude of things that can happen in that process. It gives you more control, and it allows you to be more efficient as you go forward. So we would recommend that you have a single representative in that regard. We already mentioned provide for a resource or mechanism to back up the CFO with business continuity. So let's go to page 6.
Should we wait till the end for questions?
No, sure.
How would we prioritize these? You're basically recommending 4 different positions. In your
Right.
opinion, how should we, if at all, prioritize?
Well, let me get to that, because at the very end, we'll talk about that in detail. But you're right. So, as we go through this, start writing down things that you think are important, and we'll talk about how to get there. Page 10, public safety. I understand, I saw on the menu, or the agenda today, police chief. Is our police chief interim or permanent at this point? Clearly, public safety, I think a chief of police is a good idea. And preferably as soon as you can get one. We think that this is based on our work with Chief Hill before he left. We spent a lot of time with him, and then a lot of time at our office researching. And we are convinced that his thought of needing a full-time investigator is a good idea. I don't need to add color commentary. This community is of the size and the nature that I think an investigator full-time makes sense. We think that the village should continue to search for at least one part-time officer. I know if money were available, more than one part-time or maybe another full-time would make sense. This is one of these areas where, again, there's 2 parts of it. There's the safety of the community, that's an issue. There's also a safety of your officers, that's an issue. And these officers are out there with very limited coverage for each other. And fortunately, there's not a lot of out-of-control crime, but one day that could happen. And we've got a lot of risk, and our responsibility is to look at where is the risk here, what could potentially happen. So you've been fortunate in that you haven't had a significant issue, but your days are numbered in that regard. So we really believe that some focus there needs to be implemented. And then lastly, I know that in the past the police chief was partially serving as his own administrative assistant. And for an executive of any capacity to spend part of their day acting as an administrative assistant isn't the most efficient use of money. These executives have a responsibility to do a number of things, most of which to operate your business safely and productively. And when they're busy doing clerical duty items and making copies and things of that nature, it's a significant waste of taxpayers' dollars. I can't say it more plainly. However, it doesn't necessarily have to be an exclusive administrative assistant. We have multiple departments that could use administrative help. And you could create some type of administrative pool to provide support in that regard. Okay. Page 11. Utility services. And we spent all the time with the folks in the utility department trying to again understand the challenges, where money is sort of slipping between your fingers and the way that it operates from day to day. There's a great deal riding on the back of one person in your utilities department. And much like the finance officer's office, one person goes down in the utilities department and you have a real problem on your hands. We think that having a full-time maintenance worker will shore up that situation to help with the current facilities for those things. We understand that the facilities could use some automation. They're operating on some very old manual technology. That manual requirement to operate the facilities is again costing you money. And We're in an environment today where automation will allow you to save money through personnel by simply investing in some current technology to help you get there. Administrative support would be nice. Currently, you have some administrative support being donated to the city to execute certain duties. I think that is a very nice gesture on the part of the wife in this effort, but is that the way you really want your business to run? Because when someone is contributing something through a donation, the responsibility for the job that's being done isn't somewhat enforceable. You want to have someone that's on the payroll that you can manage. We need to have a backup person for the superintendent. The redundancy will help. And in addition to that, somewhere down the road, if the superintendent decides to move along or to retire, right now he possesses a great deal of knowledge about the system that once he's gone, others may not know about. And I think it's important that you begin to bring someone up that can understand what's going on. Once some improvements can be made, however, I think you can reevaluate your staffing needs for the utilities. Page 12, Parks and Recreation, and street maintenance. So as it stands right now, I think that street maintenance could use one more additional maintenance worker. And so we've spent some time going through this with Kevin, understanding where money is being spent, and we understand there's been some change in staffing in that regard. We talked about streets especially can be one of those expenses that just sort of grows and grows and grows and eventually becomes unmanageable. But dealing with that support, there's clearly a lot of focus on parks and recreation in the community. I think that having some type of a recreation coordinator could be beneficial. The coordinator, however, doesn't have to be a full-time coordinator. That coordinator could be another employee that's already sharing or doing duties in another capacity, as long as they have the skill set and are able to carry out council's wishes in the capacity of a recreation coordinator. And 13. Now for the big one, facilities. Sometimes you really don't notice just how much money you're wasting just because people have to go across the street or next door or across town to do business with their own entity. Your current physical structure, there's two things about your current structure that are draining money out of your bank account. The first is that you're operating in a multitude of locations. The second is that those facilities, for the most part, are in pretty bad shape. They're old, they're inefficient, and they create some significant risks for the village going forward. We think that it is in your best interest to begin to look at consolidating your facilities, bringing them to a single campus, updating them, building new, whatever the case may be. And as a result of that, let's imagine all of your physical facilities having a single administrative bay, sort of an administrative pool that the police department can share, street department can share, utilities, parks and rec, the whole gamut around a single administrative pool. And you save money there. I hate to guess how much you're spending in utilities on some of those buildings, but a newer building would be a great deal more efficient from a gas and electric perspective. That's that, the council room and the breeze in the wintertime comes through there, you can feel it even with the plastic over the windows. So you're spending money in energy, and we just think all in all, it gives, as we think about the future of the village, when developers come to town, I mean, we're out-of-towners and we come to town and we have to come to the fire station because council chambers isn't the most conducive to do a presentation like this. So as you start to grow as a community, when you have people that are interested in coming in and investing millions of dollars in Plain City, think about the image that you provide them when they come to make a presentation to you in their council chambers. All of these things matter. These are the things that going forward will help shape your future. And these are the things that ultimately will keep the cost of living here lower. But we really, really suggest that you look into dealing with the facilities. There's some other issues around safety and personnel that we think matter too. From time to time, as we talk to some of your employees, they find themselves alone in some of these buildings without any significant security. You know, that is a bit of a concern, I think, from an employment perspective. Then obviously, an ADA compliance issue for mobility and things of that nature. But we believe that if done the right way and focused, if you kind of create a structure that makes sense, the cost of building a new facility is probably going to be pretty close to being offset by the savings from changing your current form of operations. So we recommend that you look at that closely. Water and sewer. We spent a lot of time, again, I mentioned with Wade going through the needs of the facilities that you have. The dollar cost to get the facilities there sort of up to speed are several $1 million at a minimum. One of the key things here is that your current capacity of the systems are regularly exceeded. And I'm not sure so far if the community has had much concern about that, but your community isn't shrinking, it's growing. And if we're already exceeding capacity on a fairly regular basis, it isn't long before you have a significant problem. So we recommend that we take whatever steps we need to take right now and focus on getting the infrastructure, at least to be able to manage the current high volume numbers when you come across them. And then ultimately build in some flexibility so that we can look at expanding the systems in the future for additional growth. We think that having some redundancies from an operational perspective help. We heard the story about the village running out of water. As a business owner, if I were building a plant in the community, that would obviously be a concern. And it might actually cause me not to want to build a plant here. We believe that moving in a direction where you have the proper safety and warning system so that type of a thing doesn't happen. Back to the issue of automation, it's an incredibly important investment in the attractiveness of this community going forward. Modernizing your controls, all of these things require some investment today, but will pay pretty significant dividends to you going forward. We know that you have a fair amount of equipment that requires maintenance on a regular basis. In fact, some of the maintenance expenses are pretty incredible, as a matter of fact. I think I want to be a UV repair person. So, water and sewer absolutely needs to be focused on so that we can move forward there. Moving to the next page. Our vehicles and equipment. You know, right now that isn't a big issue for you, other than as you go forward, we believe that you have to keep a decent inventory, know what's working for you, what isn't. I just heard at the beginning of the meeting a discussion about a new truck that was purchased. Ultimately, the fleet will need to be in good enough shape where you're not spending an extraordinary amount of manpower to keep the fleet operational. We know that some communities invest in used vehicles in order to save money. We have never really found that to be ultimately a good financial decision. In some cases, on a limited basis, maybe. In addition to that, we put defibrillators on the list there. We think we would recommend that you invest in defibrillators as well for the facilities that you currently have. I'm not sure if you have any at all, but they're a good idea, especially with a guy like me walking around every day. Page 16. So, I've laid a whole lot out, and you're going, holy cow, how are we going to pay for all of that? And the answer to that question is, I don't know how you're going to pay for all of that. You probably say, well, then you're not worth your money. All right, so here's where you are. You will need to generate money. And there's a host of ways you can do that. You're not going to be able to get where you need to go with one single solution. It's going to take a few things working together to get you where you need to go. We know that there are grants that are available. You know, one of the things that we measure is, you know, how well have you performed in getting free money to help you do the things that you need to do. And that's across the board, not just in one particular area. You don't perform as well in getting free money as most communities, but there's a reason for that. You don't have a person dedicated to trying to get free money. You know, there's a bit of a challenge. How do you apply for grants when the person that's supposed to apply for grants is busy fixing a water main break? Sort of think about that. So there are millions of dollars going to other communities because they have someone who has 6 hours to fill out a grant application. And you have someone that has 20 minutes to fill out a grant application, if that. But we think that you have an opportunity to secure grants and do better in that regard if you restructure the way that you do things. We know that by restructuring your facilities, you can capture some savings in that regard. One idea and thought, we spent time over at the police station, there's a couple things. The police station isn't the most ideal setting for bringing prisoners in, or at least people that you pick up over the weekend that are maybe a little under the influence of alcohol, because you have to share the same facilities with those folks. You have one restroom, right? Yeah, I'm not sure if people in this room have ever had spend time with inebriated people over the weekend, but it's not a pleasurable experience to share space there.
Somebody's messy.
Yeah, a little messy. So restructure your facilities in a way where the officers aren't tied up with having to clean up their own facilities so they can get back to doing their job. In addition to this, we haven't done a cost-benefit analysis, but we're aware that you have to take prisoners out to Mechanicsburg because you don't have a holding cell. And we know there's pros and cons to that, but on a busy day, it takes you 20 minutes to get there?
20, 25.
20, 25 minutes for an officer to take someone to Mechanicsburg. And then how much time to process once you get there? Probably
15, 20 minutes.
Yeah, and then back again. So you're already thin on staff. You've got an officer who's out of the loop for an hour because you don't have a holding cell. Not that they want one, I'm just saying from a financial perspective, I mean, it's going out the window to a certain degree. You could increase permits and fees for things like parades and the use of the park and the fireworks and all of that. Those are things that you'll have to talk through. And obviously those are important issues because we hear them the last 3 meetings we've been in. We keep hearing them come up. Increase utility rates. I'm going to be frank with you. That's an inevitable requirement. You are not going to be able to get where you need to go dealing with the water and the sewer issues that you have without increasing your rates. And we can tell you from our perspective that a rate increase is not unfair. Your current rates are very manageable. You implemented some new rates a couple of years ago that are now have a schedule, but prior to that it was 29 years before you had a rate increase. 29 years. That's a long time. And I think the community should be pleased that you did that, but there's something that happened during that 29 years. You have a buildup of things that now need to be fixed. And you can't get away from that. We also recommend that you look at a surcharge of some type so that you can begin to generate a maintenance fund to deal with some of these capital issues that are going to come up. The last thing may sound a little bit counterproductive, but reduce your tap fees. Your tap fees, frankly, are expensive. And if I were looking at building a home, or 2 or 3, or an entire subdivision, I would look at the cost of the tap fees and go, wow. It's a disincentive for additional growth in the community. And we think that reducing the tap fees in conjunction with other things will help actually increase your revenue potential for the community. Now, on to the things that are more painful. Increasing revenues also can come in the form of a tax increase, whether it's for income or for other things. But council has at its disposal the ability to reduce your current income tax credit. And if is it, you don't have a credit?
No.
Well, Rita shows that you have a credit on your website.
Really? They don't have it? They don't give?
Okay, so no credit. We can take that off. It's one less flexibility and one less matter that council has to worry about. There are some other odd income opportunities that the village could generate. You have water towers where telecommunications companies might actually pay for the use of the space on top of those towers. I know that you get some rental income.
We did.
You did?
We did, and they took their stuff off.
Okay. So looking at that again as another opportunity isn't a bad idea. By the way, I'm not recommending any of these. I'm just suggesting that you should, these are the ways that you go about trying to get where you need to go. Your waste service fees today are barely covering, is that about right? Barely, or do they cover?
They cover exactly.
Cover exactly the cost of waste services. So that's another area to look at. Income taxes. We know that there's been an attempt to pass an income tax, and so as a reminder right now, every 0.25% that can be passed in an income tax produces $250,000 a year in revenue. A 0.5%, so that it just sort of as a reminder, the general fund spends money for various things, including subsidizing police operations. Roughly a 0.5% income tax would eliminate the subsidy that's coming from the general fund to subsidize police operations. So if there was a desire to try to move away from subsidizing police, and in other words, freeing up general fund money to deal with some of the other issues, then a 0.5% income tax would take care of that, would do that for you. The equivalent property tax is 3.5 mils per 250,000, or 7 mils if you were interested in trying to do a property tax levy to eliminate the subsidy for police. Right now, the police subsidy is the largest cost to the general fund, and it's primarily the key number that will limit our ability to address some of these expenditure items. So knowing that, and Mr. Kennedy, now back to your question. All right, how do we know which things to deal with first? And today, none of us can answer those questions except that if a water line breaks, or the plant goes down, or City Hall burns up, these are kind of like most likely to occur kind of things. Then you have to spend money for that, but not having most likely kind of things to occur. This is what we think you should do, okay? These are our recommendations. The first is that you have to decide for yourselves how much should you keep in your savings account before you decide to spend money, okay? So you have to get your head straight and say, okay, we need to keep this amount of money in our checking account at all times so that we know that we at least have enough money to operate the way we are today. Okay, so, and make that a formal policy so it doesn't just float in the wind. The second thing is to develop a debt policy. And if you all know, you have no debt outstanding with the exception of the swimming pool. And our very first meeting, I told you that most communities like you have a similar amount of debt outstanding, except it's for infrastructure, not for leisure activities. Much like a water and sewer rate increase, debt is in your future. Unless someone wants to donate $3 million to the village. You will need to borrow money at some point in the next few years. And I think that it's a good idea for you to have a policy around how much money should you borrow, because you have a statutory limit on how much you can borrow, but just because you can doesn't mean you should. So you should have a policy about how much you should borrow. You should have a policy about how you should pay it back, where the money comes from to pay it back. You should have a policy about when to use cash versus when to borrow money, because there will be days where something will happen and you'll say, oh, let's just take $100,000 and take care of that, versus borrowing. I see Renee going, oh, don't do that. Versus borrowing. a debt policy helps you set those rules up so that you're not scrambling to sort of figure out what to do when something happens. And that's where we're trying to move to. We're trying to move to a point where you don't have to sort of make decisions on the fly. You have rules in place about, okay, when this happens, we make this decision. When that happens, we make that decision. So you have to have those rules on spending first. So starting with those policies. Then we also think that given what we know about your capital improvement needs going forward, whether it's equipment or facilities, begin to set aside money that is strictly for capital improvement that would be separate from the general fund. So it's not an operating reserve, it's a capital reserve. But in the event we happen to have a good year from an income tax perspective, scraping a few dollars off of that surplus just for capital is a good idea. Once we have those things sort of figured out in terms of how much of a reserve should we keep for capital, what our debt policy should look like, and our general fund policy, then we need to get into the assessment that I talked about at the very beginning. Getting a very nice, across-the-board look at just what do we need, and you can see it all at one time. So you don't have to hire someone from the outside. Kevin has plenty of time that he can just throw right at that and get it done. But I think you can get your department heads to get you something quickly and fairly accurate that you can work with. We think then you get your, likely at the same time, get your survey underway. And then once you have the survey results and the needs assessment, then you're able to sit down and cross-reference which things sort of crisscross. Because there are going to be some things that the community will say that are important to them, and the department heads will also be saying that's important to them. And then you can begin to prioritize. You can say, okay, we hit the sweet spot on this one. By the way, there are some things that your community won't know are important, and you're going to have to make some rational decisions, such as fixing the water plant, the sewer plant. And people turn on their water and they flush their toilets, but they don't really know what's going on under the ground. So you have to rely on Wade to say, it's not so hot under the ground. We got to make some decisions. And you have to trust that they're competent to give you that advice. But there will be some things that will overlap, and you can move those up the priority list to say this is what we need to do. So at the bottom there, the priorities should align the needs of the community with the things that council and your administration tell you are important as well. So that's how we recommend that you go about prioritizing where you put your money. So how do you get there? Once you get your assessment and your survey done, we think that council should hold a retreat. We'll call a financial retreat. And at that retreat, it probably will be an all-day, work session where you're just going to sit there all day long and work through what you've learned from the assessment and what you've learned from the survey. And this is without deciding I'm going to spend money on anything. This is just simply to decide what's the most important based on these things and what are the least important things based on these things. And put a schedule together. And once you have that schedule together, once you know, okay, we have to deal with 1, 2, 3, and 4, that's the point at which you could call us back in and we can sit down and say, all right, this is how you deal with this expense, this is how you deal with this expense, and so on. And move forward from there. But from a management perspective, it will help you to sort of move through some of these meetings where there's a focus on whether or not you should charge more for parks or more or not for parades or for things like that, because then you'll know where that falls on the priority list. And then you can deal with the things that have the most priority first and the things that have the least priority last, so to speak. That is until you have ample cash to deal with everything. But right now, and looking forward, you don't. We recommend also that in order for you to do this well, that you should use an experienced facilitator to help you through the meeting. And we know that this process can bring out emotion, and having an experienced facilitator will help you stay on task and help you be the most productive in this one-day meeting. And once you work through that, then I think you'll have a product that will let you know what your next steps should be. Any questions about that? Because we're now at the the conclusion of our presentation. In the back of your book, I put in a summary, so it's a single page at a glance summary where you can go through and just sort of say, okay, what are the things that we need to do? Again, I know this seems like a lot, and it is a lot, but if you deal with it in an orderly fashion, create some organization around it, over time, you can move toward getting to a position where the village is running even better than it is from a financial perspective. And I think you'll feel a great deal more control from a managerial perspective as you do it. And then we'll be available to help you and guide you through the process, to get you where you're going. At this point, I'll open it up for any questions. You can bring the lights back up if you want to.
To extract the data that we need, the survey's not worth the effort.
Yes,
So,
you're right. Ohio's fortunate in that there are a fair number of very, very good sort of public surveying companies. School districts use them on a pretty regular basis around the state. We can recommend a few companies to you. They will need to spend time with your administrators to understand the types of services that you provide and the sort of the when, the where, the how, that they can write questions that will help the respondents to the surveys really be able to provide the kind of responses that you need. Typically, the cost for a good company is about $10,000. It could be as much as $25,000. But this is one of those things where I think it's worth the investment. I mean, for you, especially for the police department, to have an idea of what it is that you're doing right, that the community likes.
We did one a few years ago.
Did you?
Well, maybe not a few years, what, 10, 11 years ago.
By the way,
But I don't remember that we hired it out there.
that we did. It was part of the comprehensive plan in 2001.
Yeah, 2001. I love it. Every time I talk about things like that, people go, oh yeah, we just did that a few years ago. And then they check the record and go, oh, that was 2000. I'm like, man, that was like 15 years ago.
Show your age, Dale.
So,
Show your age.
I'm following you out here.
so you get what you pay for in the surveying business. The cheaper you go, the data isn't so good. But you don't necessarily, I think the community, if you communicate with them through your board meetings and through the newspaper and maybe even a newsletter, do we do a village newsletter?
We are beginning to do the newsletter.
Okay. Through the village newsletter and invite feedback. I think you'll be surprised at how many people would want to provide you feedback. I think there are lots of people in the community that like to share what they think about what you're doing and where you're going. So I think you can, probably in a month to 2 months, have some very good feedback. Most of the survey companies use phone calling. They do phone surveys to get the information that they need, and they can pick a decent sample size and get there. Yes, sir.
I had a question, David. Thank you. You'd say on page 8, return control of budgetary process back to the fiscal officer. This question probably just comes from my ignorance of understanding, everything that she does. But what do you mean? At one point, were there duties that we took away from the fiscal officer?
No, I guess really my point is, I think the fiscal officer, in going through the process, is more or less on the sort of the budgetary numbers are put together from council's side and then provided back to her office, as opposed to being prepared in her office and then sent to council. So that's more or less the point. And again, the challenge there is ultimately the responsibility, if things don't work out right, fall on that office. So we would want to make want to make sure that that person, that office, it isn't a person issue, it's an office issue.
Yeah, no, I wasn't making it a person issue. I just didn't understand what you meant by that.
Okay.
By that sentence.
So currently, the departments work on their budgets. They're the first ones to start that process. And they work closely with Renee in doing that. And then it comes to council. Is that what you're saying? She needs to create it?
I'm saying that she needs to be the owner of an appointed person, I mean, obviously engaged with council through the process, but typically the finance officer is the key orchestrator of the budget.
We can talk about that more. Because she is part of that. I mean, she definitely, she knows the dollars, so that's why their department heads are working with her.
One question. You talked about having multiple formats that proved to be challenging as you were looking at our budgeting process. The Personnel and Finance Committee in the recent past created, really using Excel spreadsheets, a format that was used for several years that was different than the standard government accounting forms because we were seeking to get greater resolution to the various issues that weren't readily available using the standard government accounting forms. So how do you suggest we reconcile that?
From our perspective, consistency is more important than sort of what you described, in there. The challenge when you're having a set of line items that describe an expense for parks and rec here, and then the next year that same expense is categorized as something else, going back and forth. It presents a problem from an analysis perspective, so that over time, as you all move on and other people come in, let's just say that Renee leaves and several board council members leave, people will soon begin to forget what went where. And someone like me gets hired to come in and look at your financial performance, and I can't figure out what line item contained which expenses. So if we can get that, I think you've already, this year in particular, you changed things to be a little more descriptive, I believe, in some of the line items, which is a step in the right direction. And if we stay consistent with that going forward, I think the results would be much better from an analysis perspective.
You talked about need assessment, and we looked at, when you mentioned operational expenses, capital expenses, staffing, and you said it would be good for the village to take a 5-year view. Now, with that, with all those, I can see developing a pro forma budget to see what, is that what you're suggesting?
Yes.
Bert? And then compare that pro forma budget versus our present revenues to look for gaps?
You would have a pro forma needs assessment that would look ahead 5 years, and again, that's everything for all departments. And the primary reason that you want that is so that you can prioritize. Where do we need, let's just say, for the heck of it, we decide we need $1 million for water line replacement, and we also need $1 million for park equipment. So you have $2 million over the next 5 years. Well, now that you know that you need $1 million for park and $1 million for water, then you can figure out which of those two. If I have $1 million to spend, do I put it all with water? Do I put it all with the parks? Do I split it 50-50? So that's the intent of the 5-year look ahead.
Okay.
But in addition to that, so onto the operating side, we think that you also should have a 5-year operating. Why you didn't put that in there? A 5-year operating budget that looks at your general fund spending for the next 5 years as well, so that we can figure out, by the way, it's not real hard to do those, and we can help Renee put it together, so that we can also measure what's our overall financial condition going to look like, so that we're able to fund a capital reserve fund or do whatever you need to do there. So in essence, you really need two things. You need the 5-year capital assessment, and you need the 5-year operating forecast.
So,
and I know this seems like a lot that you need, but you can, it's not as bad as you think.
let's see. So you talked about having a backup for the fiscal officer. Currently, I'm aware that the person that does the books here at the fire department works on the same system that we do, and that there's others. Are you just talking about a formal, this is who it is, or is or someone in our organization as a backup?
Yeah, someone, it's more than just, this is who it is, someone that has an idea of what Renee's doing. So that if something were to happen, that you wouldn't, if something happens to her the day before payroll due, what happens?
Sorry.
So if something happens to you the day before the payroll, before you notify Paycor that it's payroll due, people don't get paid, right?
Correct.
And I mean, I'm sure everyone in this town makes so much money they can go without a paycheck. But if that happened, I wouldn't want to be.
That situation's going to occur this week. She's going to be going out of town, so.
That's timely.
And we've had to have the administrator step up and do some stuff there as well. So talk about hats. He's got many.
Okay, so, it's important, and it's definitely not a shot at Renee at all. I have 2 redundancies. I take them everywhere I go. Because you never know. I have a tendency to drive off the road on a pretty regular basis, not after drinking. I only do that when I ride my lawnmower. It's just smart business, because business has to continue forward. So, but that particular individual is employed by a different government than your village, and so you would need to have another arrangement with that individual. That was so. Again, you want to make sure that any employee that has responsibility, also, you want to have that control. You want to make sure that they do what you want them to do. Any other thoughts or questions? Because once we leave,
You're only a phone call away.
we're only a phone call. You know where to find us. I want to say to you that we can help you execute whatever you need to have executed. We can provide you the guidance. Basically, after we leave the room, the mayor and the administrator basically would have the control to move you through these next phases. Any questions that you have, names for firms to do surveys, whatever, you can call us and we can help you move it through to the next stage. And now that you have a new council person on board, anything at all that you didn't catch in some of our previous presentations, feel free to call us and we can give you that backup. But I think that the village is moving in the right direction. I think all of you have the right spirit and heart that you want to do what's right for the community. And I think it's important for the community to know that you've done a great job to this point. But you have some really challenging days ahead, and this is how you prepare for those things. All right, well, thank you very much. We really appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you.
This is just the detail.
Okay.
The notes of the, I think we're going to need the minutes.
So I haven't called him Bud so far, but now the way it's All right, council, I think that's the end of our agenda. Anybody have anything quick? Entertain motion?
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you.